rules here, there are none. We can go as deep and as vulnerable as you want to go.
I'm sure it'll go wherever it's supposed to go.
Today, I am joined by my co-host, Boudreaux, who has just had some peanut butter, so maybe he'll take a little siesta. And then also Austin Tice, who is the visionary and Texan. I still call you a Texan, even though you're in Idaho, and CEO behind NABA, which is this beautiful heart-centered community that I've mentioned on my podcast a couple of times, and I'm so stoked to be a part of. I love that I'm creating a course and getting to be at like such a phase of it and really see it grow and thrive, because like I feel like it's going to go to the moon. Or even Pluto, who knows? So I'm curious. Welcome, Austin.
Thank you, Kristin. Good to be here with you and Boudreaux.
I know. He grounds me. He's gonna be my little marketing dog.
For those of
So
us
I'm
that grew up in the 90s, that's definitely the dog from Men in Black.
from Men in Black. I never even put
Yeah.
that together. Oh my
Yeah. I mean,
goodness! Now I gotta
anytime I
see.
see one of those dogs, it reminds me of that dog from Men in Black.
Oh no, I
At
didn't
least
know.
I don't think I've seen all the Men in Blacks, but yeah,
The
one of them,
OG.
that dog was on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'll look it up. I saw him. I just envisioned him in like putting on some like little doggy glasses and reading some books and stuff like that, and maybe having his own social account. Who knows? But I'm excited to have you on here to talk all things NABA, which stands for the natural art of being alive. I'd love to like be taken to the heart of the moment, like where the idea even came about, like where you were um, in life, physically, all those things.
Yeah. Well, no, it's a great question. I get asked it a lot. And, you know, I think the substance of the answer remains the same, but how I answer it has evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Just my perspective on where I was at's changed a lot, and there's a lot of um, different emotions anchored in that. But um, in putting NABA together, I will tell you uh, ultimately what it's become and what it is now was not the original vision. I don't know that, at least in the two companies I've started, the original vision and then you watch it come to life and evolve. It changes. I think that's what makes any great entrepreneur is not being in love with being right or
Mm,
so in love with the way you think it should be that you're unwilling to adapt and evolve in ways that can ultimately allow what you've created to be a catalyst for real change and transformation in people's lives. And
mm,
ultimately, that's been the bullseye we're after. And so it's been a really beautiful journey to be on, very much a macro patient journey, but at the same time, a real sense of urgency, a real focus, and a real linear attachment to moving with speed. I feel that whenever you marry those worlds together of it's a sprint and a marathon at the same time, so to speak,
mm,
you're able to gain a real feel on the environment, a deeper understanding, gaining the wisdom needed to see the board more clearly, to understand 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 moves out, what your options are, what the consequences to your decisions hold. And so that's been a not a unique part of our journey, but one that in this particular one feels like it's been extrapolated out a little longer than others. But regarding where I was at, I wouldn't say I was retired. I would have never called myself that. I was sort of feeling into what I wanted to do next. I was in a really great position with different business decisions I'd made in my life, whether that be riding some of the crypto waves up or having fun trading securities. I never really did that until COVID because I felt like all the stuff I loved to do, even in business, was kind of contracted. So I had all this time. There were no
mm,
sports on television. And I thought, well, hell, I'm going to start trading stocks. And, um, there's a lot of really smart people on Twitter that if you follow and you don't get greedy, you can do really well. And I did. and that's been a lot of fun. I've had a blast in real estate. It's one of my favorite things to do. You mentioned Idaho, have a ranch in Texas, bought a place in Hawaii. And Ultimately, I had a lot of fun. In my last company, I started with one of my best friends since we were 12. We had a lot of success in the hemp industry, um, and were involved in that project for just under a decade. So, really committed to seeing it out and stepped away at a time that we felt was both right. And that is sort of what created the ecosystem to consider what that next move might be.
Mm-hmm.
And in our case, it was creating NABA. Probably one of the hardest things we came up with, Kristin, was the name, which has turned into a real strength for us because the
I mean, it's
acronym
really
is so
awesome
cool.
name. Yeah.
But I wanted, you know, I'm not attached to any of the things that people get real caught up on the edge of their seat emotionally to the degree that it pulls them out of their body and they have a disassociating experience with seeing things and immediately putting them in different political categories. I
Mm,
recognize that we live in a country where, unfortunately, so many things have been made to be political. And
mm-hmm.
if you think or feel a certain way about these things, you're put into a category of who
Mm-hmm.
you are and who you aren't. And I
Mm-hmm.
just don't think that things are that black and white. I feel that the way I grew up and with my mom and dad being so involved politically, whether it be in little league school boards or little league board elections or actual school board elections or even congressional campaigns, justice of the peace, county judge, county commissioners. I've just had a front row seat and seen it, and the beauty of what government can be. And I understand nothing so black and white as what some of the more mainstream media talking heads would
Mm-hmm.
lead us to believe they might be. And so, as I'm watching things unravel institutionally, whether you look at media and how people get their information, whether you look at finance and banking with what's happening in different regulations or deregulated
Mm-hmm.
spaces like crypto, all the way down to people's viewpoint of religion and some of the institutions that have influenced how people operate and view reality. I sort of see this as a season of revelation where people are waking up to a lot of things that have kept them operating in the world in certain ways. And I don't see that in a way that's destructive. I see it as a way that can be really beautiful, where people can wake up and step into their promise and their potential and really not allow so much of their previous histories of what maybe broke their heart to influence their inability to be present, but instead of that being the hand on the wheel, so to speak, getting really present with who you are, who you want to be, who you don't want to be, get grounded in that, and not be so afraid to get back into your heart and connect that brain and heart and go do some really cool stuff in the world. And so, in putting NABA together, I wanted to create a community and a space with really just cool people. Didn't care what that their beliefs aligned with mine 100%. In fact, what a boring ass place that might be.
Yeah. Like an
Um,
echo chamber.
but just wanted to create a space, yeah, that welcomed people that were on that hero's journey of pursuing
Mm-hmm.
more, wanted to know more about why they were here on this planet, wanted to explore more about their relationship with their creator. And here we are. We've got a really great ecosystem of different content and courses and partnering with our favorite supplement companies and through this public beta, bringing hundreds of people into our community. And, I think we have a shot of being a real um, vestige of hope for people that want to change themselves and that want to
Mm-hmm.
be a part of helping change the world in some really awesome ways.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of hope and then there's a lot of opportunity for actions like embedded within the community. Like if you need guidance, if you need support. And one of the things that really drew me to NABA too is that like I totally, of course, like am an advocate for free speech and in some places I feel like I'm shadow banned or things if I mention XYZ. And I love that one, it's like we're not being sold. And also we can bring and like have different conversations, or we can talk about, quote unquote taboo topics, or, bring all of who we are into a space instead of like a fractionalized version of ourselves. Because I know I have definitely felt pressure in other platforms to show up a certain way, or like, especially like in the early days of Instagram or something. Like, okay, I gotta have like the right picture, filter, caption, like put so much pressure on that. But it's like really just coming back, I feel like, to the truth of who we are and being able to have a space where people feel safe to be authentically themselves and be vulnerable. I think that's really dope. And that's one of the main reasons that I think it's really dope, but there's so many. I'm curious, like, what has been one of the biggest changes from early vision of NABA to what it is now? And I also feel like one of the cool things for me, like being a part of like this stage of it, is how open and willing and receptive you are to other people's ideas. And it's like, hey, I think it'd be cool to have like this component or this element. I just want to say kudos to that too.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's not always easy to do. I think that's an area I'll always grow. I think, you want to have some semblance of control as it relates to executing on your vision, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, you want people to be and know that they're a part of that creation process too. That's deeply empowering, not just surface level or just words, but
Mm-hmm.
sincerity attached to the fact that as intimately as involved as you want to be in the creation process of bringing this community to life, you can be. And so it's a tightrope you walk, but I do my best to listen. And I think that our members have done a great job of offering some really great insight that's allowed us to grow and get better. And I expect that will continue to happen. The, as it relates to the original vision of NABA, I never envisioned that it would actually be a community the way that it's
Mm.
evolved into. You know, my last company, we had you know, about 175,000 customers. I think total was the number. Could be a little less than that, could be a little bit more, but let's just call it that. And the community sort of existed in the ether that what brought us together is we loved the mission of bringing hemp into the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there wasn't an actual like space like a Facebook or an Instagram or a LinkedIn or a TikTok or any space whatsoever that you could come together, share what was on your heart, what was on your mind, and in a very linear sense, um, the way people were valued was placed solely upon their ability to perform
Mm.
or execute in bringing sales to the table. So imagine bringing 10,000 influencers into the room and only acknowledging the ones that were selling a lot, even though everyone was selling something. So
Mm-hmm.
it was really easy to be marginalized and made to feel less than if you weren't performing at a very arbitrarily interpretation of what the word high level might be.
Mm-hmm.
So, in developing and building NABA, as we started creating content, as we started partnering with some of our favorite companies, starting with Quicksilver Scientific, it became really clear to me that if we created an ecosystem that functioned very similar to the LinkedIn or Facebook, where intention existed because of the mission we were attached to, all the way to, on a very personal level, what people wanted to accomplish in their own lives, and didn't marginalize people by only recognizing those that were interested in selling something. It's
Mm-hmm.
not to say that that's a bad thing. That's a great thing. But there's a space for those individuals. But now there's a space for people that if they want to show up and contribute with insight, perspective, and wisdom, they can. And we value that as much as we do the person that's deeply motivated to go and
Mm-hmm.
bang the NABA gong and promote it and make money and all of that stuff. And so I think that's more forward thinking and is more representative of what some people might call conscious capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
where, there's a place for everybody at the table, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an inclusive environment. I remember being bullied before as a
Yeah.
kid. I don't want to be shunned out. It's very healing.
You know, I know I think I know what it's like to be on both ends of that. As I look back at my life, I probably could have done better in both areas, stood
Oh
up for
yeah.
the ones who
Oh,
were
for
and
sure.
maybe, yeah, not been one. But
Hmm.
yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, I still remember that one moment growing up when I was like, oh, I was part of a circle that, teased someone. And then like that haunts me, even though it was also done to myself. But yeah, just always like remember, it's like I could have shown up better in that moment. So you've been at this for a few years now, right? I'm curious, like you said something on a call the other day about don't if someone tells you that they never want to quit, they're lying. Or like there's moments of doubt or maybe challenging moments. And so I just went all in on like all of my offerings. And so there's definitely like a roller coaster. There's a peak experience and there's like a challenge like, what did I do? And then going back. But I'm curious, personally, and then just for listeners too, like what your perspective is, or like how do you persevere in those challenging moments, or what kind of mindset do you hold, or what do you default to in those times?
Man, I can think back on my career in baseball, considering how much I loved it, and man, it could be a lot easier to just quit. For me, I don't know that everyone has some of the motivations I have that kept me from quitting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just thinking about how much I would disappoint people. Um, and someone obviously may say, well, it's not their life, but, it is their last name. And that means something to me. And it doesn't make the way I function right or wrong, so to speak, but so many of the moments where it felt like the weight I was carrying was more than what I was capable of. There's a checklist that you go down internally. And I don't ever even make it to the end of that checklist before I
Okay.
realize there's a way out of this. That the dream that I have, if I'm co creating with my creator, why in the world would I have this if I wasn't
Mm,
going to be equipped, if they weren't already there with the tools and skills and talents, or they were already there? I just had to discover them within myself.
mm,
Oftentimes, it's just belief, it's thought and emotion that influence your ability to move through anything. But when things get tough and you think about, the back door is looking a lot more sexier than the front door right now. Maybe I can just ease on out. I think about my last name. I think about my mom and my dad.
mm,
So much of what motivates me is making my brother, my mom and my dad, my best friends proud. The challenge in my life has been bringing myself up into that person I want to make proud too.
mm-hmm,
It's so that's the first part of the checklist, and typically I never really get past that one. I
mm,
just remember that you know I'll figure it out. It'll be all right. But I think it's pretty normal for people to feel a sense of overwhelm. The reason that what you're pursuing is possible is because the place that you're existing is unfamiliar.
mm,
And that's where the possibilities of what it is you want to create exist. If it were known, then, what are we doing here? It just becomes a part of the routine. There's an excitement to it. There's an adventure to it. For me, I think stepping into the world of being an entrepreneur was a natural fit. Um, there's a feeling that you love, that when the game's on the line, you want to be the person that finds themselves in the position to do something about it. And I feel like when you choose to be the chief executive of your life or the chief executive of your business, then inherently you absolutely better have a tolerance for ambiguity and a desire to exist in the land of unfamiliar. Otherwise, you're probably fucked.
yeah.
And for me, that tolerance for ambiguity it's what my everyday is. And there's an adventure to it. There's a sexiness to it. There's something romantic about it, knowing that I get to be the creator of my life. I feel that when you start thinking about quitting, it's because you ease into a state of being that moves away from creator and into being a victim.
Mm.
And we're all
Mm.
professionals at that. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's just a practice you work through. But there's no right or wrong about, I think, how anyone in a very deeply personal way moves through these things. But that's how I move through them. And in any instant in my life, I've noticed that if I'm having urges or sensations that would typically bring me to make decisions or do things that I would not look back on and be proud of, then I need to move my energy.
Mm.
I need to change something about my state
Mm.
of being. And there's some processes I work through that do that. I can adjust how I'm eating, and that's more of
Mm.
a macro thing. I can adjust. I can go for a walk. I can go for a hike. I can go exercise. I will tell you the single most influential, life changing thing that I've learned how to do is meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't approach any meditation from this place of, I'm just going to quiet my mind. I approach my meditation the second that I put my mask on and I sit in this chair or lay on the floor in front of my desk, that I'm not going to be the same person I was when I opened my eyes,
Mm.
and I expect miracles to take place in the midst of this moment.
Mm. I love
And
that.
I've moved through
Mm.
understanding that I can control my state of being, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how I think and how I feel.
Mm.
And I'll start that meditation, and I won't get out of it until it's changed. And you don't just sit there and try and think of nothing in order to accomplish that. Certainly that's a part of it, but there's an act of laboring for that present moment and getting on the
Mm-hmm.
other side of whatever it is that's heavy on your heart or on your
Mm-hmm.
mind, and those cyclical thoughts that keep showing up that reinforce the same feelings, that reinforce the same thoughts and get you in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know if I sit here and I settle down, and that may take an hour, eventually everything chills. I move on the other side of it, and I can just feel everything anchor in. For me, I like to anchor into my heart,
Mm-hmm.
and with some breath and intention, and with the mechanics of the breath and intention attached to it, uh, I get to work.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy. It's not always something that I want to do. But I don't think anyone becomes great because they get to do the things they want to do all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
think you become great because in the midst of not feeling like doing
Mm-hmm.
something, you do it anyways.
Yeah, you show
And
up.
eventually you become that thing that you seek. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So cool. Is it a guided one, or now do you go to like I know you like Joe Dispenza. I like him too. I almost did one this morning. I was like, I'm having a podcast with Austin. I feel like I need to do a Daddy Dispenza one. But to start the day. Um, but I'm not perfect and I
I've
didn't.
never heard him called that, but
I
I'll check
love
him out.
it. Yeah. Because I don't know, I saw like somewhat a video online and that just makes it more personal for me. So I'm like, Daddy Dispenza. It makes it more
I'm
fun.
sure he would smile
Um,
if he heard that.
yeah. Um, so are those some of the ones that you default to, or is it just kind of doesn't have to be a guided one now because you've done it so often? But I just love like the intentionality behind, okay, I am not moving until like I am on the other side of this or I feel differently than when I sat down.
Yeah, Dr. Joe talks about one day, one lifetime.
Mm.
And when you approach your day like it's a lifetime, he constantly asks, what would greatness do? What does greatness look like? And at the end of the day, when you review it, the goal would be to say, I'm really proud. And it's an interesting way of what the definition of proud might be for me, because for me, it creates an emotion of worthiness.
Mm.
And so it's this interesting thing of what the side effect of showing up is. It's worthiness.
Mm.
And the wild thing about meditation, in what I've learned from Dr. Joe, is while I might move into that meditation with fervor and intention and a desire to overcome how I feel, to create something new within myself, new within my world, ultimately it feels that the channels that are opened, the portals that are opened, the ability to connect and create um, exist in one's ability to be worthy of it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
for me, I've noticed that consistency creates an atmosphere of worthiness within yourself.
Mm.
You know, it's just very common sense.
Gotta
The
write
more
that down.
consistent you are, the more the more worthy you're going to feel like of receiving that which you want to have in
Mm.
your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're honest with yourself, and whether you have the discussion, I think we're really honest with ourselves about what we deserve, and that's what we're getting. Then if I know I'm putting in the work, there's something that shifts. If you just said to yourself, I'm going to do this every day, and no
Mm.
one else in the world knows that you made that commitment to you but you,
Mm.
and you honor that commitment, the side effect is showing up for you, man. You start feeling really worthy, and your energy starts to shift, and your world starts to
Mm.
change. And the reason your world starts to change is because you start to change. And it becomes a really pivotal experience because you realize you're the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what Joe has encouraged all of his students to do. I can speak for myself in that as a baseball player for half of my life, every at bat was a little bit different because I would make adjustments based on a lot of variables: who was on the mound pitching, how many people were on base, what the score was, how I felt, what inning it was, whatever. You could go down the list of things that would influence
Mm-hmm.
adjustments I'm making based upon what? The outcome I wanted to create. Well, when you move into these states where you're doing a meditation, before you ever go in, what's the game plan? What do I want to accomplish here? What do I want to create? And this is a big part of Joe's teaching where a lot of people say, oh, what meditation should I do? Do any
Mm-hmm.
of them. And
Yeah.
I had to go through that myself. But when you get in there, don't decide what you're going to do then before it ever starts. This is what I'm going to accomplish. This is my experiment today, whether how I'm going to work my body with my breath, where I'm going to place my attention, how
Mm.
I'm going to move my breath, all of it. And
Mm-hmm.
as you begin to experiment, I think you'll notice that that will carry on throughout the rest of the day in your life.
Mm.
And ultimately, the level of consistency that's applied to that, there's just that side effect showing up that is worthiness. It's a really beautiful thing.
Okay. I'm going to make the commitment to myself to do it every day. But it's not just a promise to myself. I've got listeners and you listening and Boudreaux. No. No, I think that that's such a powerful statement that the consistency creates worthiness. And interesting to tie like the pride and worthiness like to your family and stuff too. I recently had like a really cool epiphany. And I'm kind of working it actually into like some of the talk or some of the scripting I'm doing for my course on NABA because it was so life changing. But I actually have this book right here from my dad that he gave me before he died, about a year before he died. And one of the things he talks about, or one of the things that asks, is like, what were some of the most proud moments in your life? And he's like, well, that would be the day you were born, and then the day you and your brother were born, and the day you graduated college. And it was only like a few months ago that I had this epiphany that something that I had been working and yearning for my whole life to make my dad proud, I had since birth. And I was just like burst into tears. I was like, oh, and of course, like I still want to make him proud in other ways today. But I just thought it was like a really cool story that stories can transcend time, and something that he gave me in 2012 had such a pivotal effect on me today in 2024. And it was so cool. I love, there's like this guy. Do you know who Peter Crone is?
I don't think so.
He's super cool, super funny, like Brit. And he also mentions worthiness. And I love looking at it on this perspective too. He's like, really, when you boil it down, um, perfectionism and procrastination are two coins and are two sides of the same coin, and that's worthiness. And one of them is an underactive response and one of them is an overactive response. And I'm like, how many times in my life have I vacillated between both of those? It's like under, especially as it pertains to like writing and storytelling, except for after taking a course in NABA, I now call myself a pressure performer. I'm not procrastinating, I'm a pressure performer. But when I'm like, I've been working to meet a recent manuscript, and I'm like, okay, maybe I need to just do this a little bit more as I go instead of like trying to cram it in the last couple of weeks. It's been fun. But you mentioned the word experiment, and I love like looking at it through that lens too. It seems to take a lot of the weight off of it. It's like, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to try this and see what happens versus, like it just has like less rigidity, I guess, around it. So I love that you brought that to the table too. And as far as like,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's, it's just a process that I'm constantly mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
And I hold some very personal convictions in my heart around a definition I've been becoming more familiar with, which is what is surrender,
Mm,
and not being so hard on myself in the process of self discovery. I
mm,
think so many people want things to show up right now. And man, if
mm-hmm,
that's a lot of pressure if you want something right now, because when you start on any journey, if you want it now, you're going to soon deal with some level of overwhelm because you realize
mm,
there's no such thing. It's a journey. It's a part of it. It's a constant unfolding. And so, speaking of Dr. Joe, his I'll never forget when he said, "Surrender is a never-ending process of letting go and trusting."
mm,
And that really gave me permission to move at my own pace, and going a little bit further. There's scripture that talks about taking up your cross or dying to yourself. And growing up, my interpretation of that simply meant not listening to that song, or as you get a little bit older, maybe not having that extra drink or not smoking that thing, or very ancillary things that people choose to do to numb or to sort of let go or relax or whatever. And what's really interesting is in my own journey of understanding meditation, ultimately, what it's allowed me to become more familiar with is myself. How else, if within scripture we are encouraged and taught to take up our cross and die to ourselves daily, are you able to do that if you aren't familiar with yourself? Because
mm,
while you might not have that drink or listen to that song, ultimately, that's not addressing the issue. That's addressing the thing that's reflective and exists because of the issue, which is you. And
mm-hmm,
so in my meditation practice, it's become deeply spiritual, because the
mm,
more I get to know me and the more I come up against the place where I'm losing sense of who I am and surrendering more deeply into my creator and
mm,
truly letting go of the things I hold on to that I find identification in. Typically that's how you think and feel, which
mm,
creates the world you live in those
mm,
ancillary examples I gave. Man, that's when it becomes a sort of a romance, and that you look forward to closing your eyes because you're
mm,
letting go of you and surrendering more deeply into our creator.
mm,
And you know that's been a very personal journey for me. it's been a very scary one. I never thought meditation would be scary, but I think that's why a lot of people, you'd have to pull this up and drop the link and do the research. I don't want to misquote, but there was a study done. I have it saved in my bookmarks on X, but there was a study done. There was this room put together, and it was a room where there was no sound, and people would go in there to see how long they could exist. And very few people could last that long at all because were just very much having to deal with themselves, their thoughts, and to a lesser degree, the data around how many people can go into a room with a mask on and their eyes closed and stay in there for 1 hour with themselves.
Mm.
And man, that says a lot. And what I began to realize when this journey of very intimate self-discovery through meditation started with me was how much of myself I wanted to pretend didn't exist. Lose myself in the execution of having success in a business, lose myself in the execution of having a relationship, going to nice dinners, traveling, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I was never going to escape that which was always going to be there, and that was me.
Mm.
And so it's it's a it's a really beautiful journey. It can be scary because if you're committed to the process, you'll come up against the opportunity to truly let go of what brought you to the curiosity of wanting to know more in the first place, and that's you. And how else can you reinvent yourself unless you're willing to let go of the thing
Mm-hmm.
that you know is not serving you?
Yeah.
And going back to what we talked about earlier, it's that familiar versus unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
It's the known versus the unknown. And there's a sense of safety in what's familiar, even though you know it might not be
Mm-hmm.
serving you. It's like you know those waters. You can
Mm-hmm.
navigate that territory. You're a professional and that trauma nonsense. You
Mm-hmm.
got it down. Even though you know there's some greatness on the other side of that, because you don't know it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful process.
Yeah, I think there's so much power in like the perspective too. I was talking to someone yesterday, they're like, yeah, they said something like, there is no good and bad. It's like, or if there is, like, we define what that is. And like, we define like whether we greet the unfamiliar or unknown as, or see it maybe as scary or as like a wonderful place where all the opportunities lie. Whenever you said something about surrendering and that being trusting and letting go, I kind of had like a slight little chuckle to myself too, because I feel like one of the lessons I signed up to learn is patience. And I feel like there's an element of patience embedded in that because you're trusting and letting go of like your timeline on when you think something should show up, and just allowing it to come in when it's naturally meant to come in. And then as Boudreaux's in my lap, I'm like, he's definitely helping teach me a little bit of patience, even though sometimes it's frustrating as all get out. Would you say that like patience is an element, or like what role like does patience play in that?
Uh, I don't know. I was sitting there visualizing Boudreaux chilling and
He's yeah.
being the dad that's actually an alien from Black.
He's what? Yeah, no, he's chilling, surprisingly. uh, so I also want to talk about I'm curious. So do you weave visualization into like your meditations, or do you have a separate visualization practice or to identify like a certain vision that you're going for?
I do. I do. There's some meditations where it's involved and others where it's not. Um, once I really quiet my brain and I'm on the other side of any of the distortion that any un, any heavy burdens in my heart or crazy thoughts would create. Typically in Joe's work, the thought sends the signal, and your heart would draw that signal back into you with an elevated emotion. And
Mm,
so I'm attaching with my breath and a divergent focus, meaning I'm really sensing the space around me. And the more of that you do, the less of your body is going to be involved. You really are just pure consciousness at that point. You're just you. And that's really when you get to do the work. And typically, when I'm in that space, nothing couldn't be perfect. It's always perfect. The temperature's perfect. The
mm,
way my body's positioned is perfect. Even though I don't even really feel it, it's almost as if, everything's just asleep and I'm awake, is what it might feel like. And yeah, I'm using my breath mechanically as a tool to, really just pull into and out of my heart the type of emotion that I want to embody and feel, as if that thing that I'm sending the signal out to pull back into me already existed in my life.
mm,
And it's a reminder that that I seek is already here. I'm not separate
mm,
from it.
mm,
And so that's a part of my you know process in the middle of sending that signal with the thought. There's certainly moments that sometimes, even without me thinking about it, visualization is taking place. Now,
mhm,
what's interesting about the underlying intention of my meditations is I've noticed very distinctly that oftentimes there's two paths being forged at the very same time. There's the path of intention that sits beneath the path of creation. And the path of intention is me being present and how I feel. And on the other hand, the path of creation that I'll get lost in the thought of the visualization of, it's almost as if I forget I'm in the meditation and no longer laboring for that present moment and elevating my state of being through my thoughts and feelings, but I get lost in the creation of that which I'm seeking.
mm,
But in the midst of that, I'll remember I'm in a meditation and I'll pull my attention back to that other path. And what's
mm,
really interesting is every single time I'm much further along, I'm much more present, and I'm much more deeper in my practice than I was before I got lost in the visualization
mm,
of the thought. And what
mhm,
I've learned is that even though I might not be present on my intention is working on behalf of me,
mm,
and it's setting the stage for the creation.
mm,
And um, that's been a really beautiful piece of wisdom I've gained from my work. I think anyone that's practicing regularly gains knowledge through the things they learn in these very personal spaces that maybe someone else may have read in a book. You won't forget that. And you'll find
mhm,
yourself talking about it the way I am, like you read it in a book. No, how did you learn about intention and creation? Well, let me tell you what's happening in my meditation. It's become really clear
mhm.
to me. Oh,
Like
that makes sense. That's
experientially.
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. There's been some times
And
I like
so I weave them
oh,
together.
yeah. No, there's been some times where like the morning meditation one with Joe, where like he like said something about leaning into the vision of your future. So there's been some times where I'm like, I'll go in with a vision that I think, or then sometimes it's times it's been like a surprise and delight where I was like, that was not something like I constructed. It came from somewhere else. And that I'm like, I don't know where that link, and then that would evoke an emotion. And I was just like, like, just like grateful and just like an overwhelming sense of like happiness. I guess that's like that, contact with the divine in some ways that he talks about. That's what it felt like. And so, and then, um, loving that too. And so I'm like, then sometimes that one also becomes the vision, but it's fun. I'm curious, like, what are you most excited about right now? And then I'd also love to like touch on their like detox journey that's coming up.
I don't know. This is I mean, I'm looking out the windows of my office and I guess
Mm-hmm.
it's snowed about 18 inches in the last 30 hours and it's snowing right
Wow.
now and absolutely stunning. And so right now, I think the thing I most look forward to is it's my favorite time of year. I love the holidays. I love
Mm,
Thanksgiving with
mm-hmm.
my family. I'm a big Dallas Cowboys fan, so that won't be nearly as exciting to watch them because they're
Mm-hmm.
terrible this year. Um, I love traveling during the holidays, even though a lot of people might despise it. I like being around people. I
Mm-hmm.
like seeing all the things happening, people's families being together. Um, and I love Christmas time. It's the
Mm-hmm.
best. I have the greatest memories of going to my grandparents' house in the morning on my mom's side, then leaving there and going to my dad's side grandparents. Um, and then we still get together. We do a candlelight service every Christmas Eve. So beyond anything in business, I feel like I like so much of my life is uh, so attached to what I've been creating in NABA that
Mm-hmm.
when I think about what I'm most excited about right now, the obvious answer is there's a lot of cool shit we're doing in NABA that I'm stoked
Mm-hmm.
about. But um, I love the holidays. I love being around my family. I love traveling in the holidays, seeing all my old friends in my hometown, going to the bar and having a beer with all my buddies that I grew up with, um, going to my ranch, going to the pond, seeing all the cows floating around, all of that stuff I look forward to. But, the NABA answer, there's so much that I feel like we've just sort of backed into that I would say is on accident, but it's obviously not. It was supposed to be this way. It's just we have something so cool, such a cool community, such great people, great content. I feel like the community as it exists now in this smaller cohort of call it 500 people through
Mm-hmm.
this public beta all wants the same things for themselves and they want to see the same things happen in the world. And because we're an American based company, I'll go a step further. They want to see the same things happen in our country. They're not living under any type of spell. And there have been many cast in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years of what the world is and what it isn't. I feel like there are people that are awake and they're not attached to, as we discussed earlier, to being right. They're just
Mm-hmm.
attached to getting it right. They love people, they love our country, and they really see NABA as a catalyst to nurture and support people in this movement that is a groundswell happening. And it is a nonpartisan issue to me of,
Mm-hmm.
call it what it's been called, making America healthy again,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not associating ourselves with any particular party. There's a lot of nonsense that's happened all across the board. But one thing I
Mm-hmm.
can get down with, undoubtedly for sure, I'll throw my last name on it and I'll fight for it all my life, is knowing we can do better as it
Mm-hmm.
relates to healthcare, as it relates to food, as it
Mm-hmm.
relates to our own individual practices around mindfulness and I feel like if we address those things, if we get the heart and the brain and what we're
Mm-hmm.
putting into our body, what we're putting onto our body, who we're surrounding ourselves with, if we can address the mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional components of our individual selves, all of these other things that have become political talking points in our country, they'll resolve themselves because the
Mm-hmm.
heart of the problem is our health. And that is a big part of the NABA mission. So
Mm-hmm.
moving into 2025, that is what I'm most excited about. I feel that we're going to be very, very, very loud and we're going to make ourselves very well known and an absolute mover, shaker, and player in that space. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, I love both your answers. First off, I love the holidays. I love all of the health centric aspirations too. It's like because I have that for myself. Of course, like if I don't have my health, what do I have? And then like not, I feel like if I am having some issues or complications in one area, whether that's energetically, emotionally, mentally, physically, like professionally, it bleeds over into another one. And so I just like love that idea of optimization for my health and the health of others. And I feel like whenever we do the work of ourselves, I think of a greater tapestry. Like we're an individual thread, but as we each work to, make our threads more vibrant, the whole tapestry shifts and changes. And I just love that too. Um, and then, I'm totally ramped up and excited about the detox that we're going to be doing with the community in January, because I have been having some brain fog lately. I'm like, is it my luteal phase? Is it like what I've been eating? Like, what is it? So I like the idea of like just cleansing and starting the year fresh, because there is just something symbolic for me at that time of year too. It's like a time to get clear on intentions and goals and aspirations, and also just like hit the reset button. So I know you've had a personal story if we want to share a little bit about the detox. And then, then we can wrap up.
Yeah, of course. I'll add one thing that came to mind as you
Yeah.
were speaking, and dive into detox, and that's, I feel that there are a lot of really incredible people in the world that have beautiful hearts and are high character and that love humans and that are, you know, have so much to give. I feel that people are coming up against a very um, real place of conviction within themselves where the rubber is meeting the road, and they're recognizing that the reason that we're in this situation as Americans is because we've been complacent in the areas that now require us to be courageous.
Mm.
And
Mm.
what's interesting is it's not some uncommon level of courage that's needed. It's just the simple approach, and it can certainly be vulnerable, of getting your heart involved and being able to speak your mind. What will fix the problem is not the same level of consciousness that created it. And in
Mm-hmm.
order to evolve and advance our consciousness, it
Mm.
takes the effort of all of our perspectives to create a new one.
Mm.
If you remember that particular scene on it was in the Dark Knight series where Morgan Freeman was, they had created this supercomputer, and what it created was all of these different perspectives that created ultimately a consciousness. It was a little bit of an AI thing before AI was a real talking point in the world. And in order to advance ourselves, it's important that everyone's involved, because
Mm.
we each bring something that's really important to the table that no technology can replace. And that is our very unique vibratory signature of
Mm.
our experience and wisdom.
Mm.
And whenever that's exposed, there's a truth and an evolution, and with that, a revolution that takes place. And man, that's what I want to encourage people to do: is speak their heart, speak their truth, be honest, and be open to learning from other people. And ultimately, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's what the NABA mission is about. Is we want to advance and evolve, and we're going to do that because we're going to encourage people to be themselves and
Yeah.
not discourage them because maybe they have a difference of opinion on us of something.
Mm-hmm.
As it
Mm.
relates to the detox, um, with our introduction into the world, and taking NABA very much mainstream, um, it's sort of not coincidental that we're doing that right into January. We'll get Boudreaux on kick too.
Yeah. He's awake
With the
now. He's
detox.
ready for the revolution.
Yeah. And the detox is cool because it requires two things: unlearning and relearning. So much of how we show up is influenced by the toxic burden that we carry. And those toxins and the emotions that oftentimes coincide with them that we hold in the liver, we are going to, in this detox, very mindfully fluidize that liver, contract the gallbladder, catch it with a binder, and release it. There's
Mm.
some kidney support, liver support, and a lot of really cool, supportive, whether that be adaptogenic blends or glutathione supplements that will be there along this 30-day detox that we've put together with our partnership with one of my favorite people, Dr. Christopher Shade over at Quicksilver Scientific. When it comes to detoxification, um, everyone says they're the best. He really is. Let's just be real. I mean, the
He's
dude's
dope.
next level at getting out of the body that doesn't need to be there. My own personal story, I won't give you the long version,
Mm-hmm.
but I was in the 98th percentile in the world of cadmium, lead, and probably most importantly, mercury.
Mm.
And I felt terrible. I didn't know I felt terrible because I'd become such a pro at keeping the water line just beneath overflow. But
Mm.
anytime little things happened that shouldn't have sent me into a tailspin, and how I felt in my brain and depressed and almost as if something wasn't firing on all cylinders,
Mm.
it'd throw me off. I'll give you a couple of examples. If I were in California and I was around wildfires, the smoke, which most everybody else had a resiliency to tolerate, I didn't. It would
Mm.
completely throw me off. I'd have severe anxiety,
Mm.
severe brain fog. And yes, is that is par for the course with being exposed to a toxic environment. But man, I'm like, dude, I'm 30 years old. I should be able to handle this more gracefully. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I couldn't was because I was already carrying such a toxic load. And the reason I wasn't aware of the toxic load is like the frog that gets slowly boiled over time, as opposed to the frog that's thrown into the boiling water would jump out.
Mm.
Slowly over time, I had developed this toxic load.
Mm.
As I got to know Dr. Chris Shade, he worked with me while he was developing this advanced push catch. And it took not that long for that energy to shift. And what was crazy is it changed my life. I now don't trip out if I'm going to a place in a city where the air quality is horrible. I don't want to be in there long, but I know I'm not going to have this fight or flight experience in my body.
Mm.
Um, and I've just developed a more mindful relationship with my liver, with my kidneys, with different parts of my body that not only did I not have a relationship with, I didn't even know where they were at, And so um, it's just a really beautiful experience to let go of things you don't have to hold on to, whether that be toxins or emotions. And what's crazy is when you let go of toxins you're carrying, whether that's pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, if you live around a golf course, or if there's glyphosate being sprayed in your front yard, or God
Mm.
forbid you're eating foods that are exposed to it, all the way to fluoride in the water, to microplastics, to
Mm-hmm.
molds, to heavy metals. Go down the list. When you let these things go, you'll realize you're now no longer under the obligation to show
Mm.
up as the person you had to respond and survive in that environment, because it no longer exists.
Mm.
So you will, in fact, be a different person.
Mm-hmm.
This detox will remove the distortion that dulls your light and how you show up in the world. It's a
Mm.
really, really cool thing. And the sort of anecdotal thing that happened to me beyond the ones that I would say changed my life, this one didn't, was I had really, really, really dark brown eyes. And when I
Mm.
detoxed heavy metals and mercury, on any given day, my eyes are light brown. You can probably see that now, to the degree that sometimes they're amber. And they were
Mm.
dark brown before I
Wow.
detoxed these heavy metals. Now, it's sort of like a parlor trick, so to speak. That's not something we're going to put on the website to promote. Hey, your eye color is going to change. But it's just, move into this new year with an expectation of, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to be a
Mm-hmm.
difference in how the world changes. I saw a guy speak at a church I was at about 8 years ago. His name was Eugene Cho. He has a place up in Seattle. He wrote a book called Overrated. And I'll never forget one of the lines in the book. He said, everybody wants to talk about changing the world, but nobody wants to talk about changing themselves.
Oh.
What a what a really beautiful time and what a stereotypical time to embrace to
Yeah.
start that change in the new year.
Yeah.
We will have not only all of the supplements to support you, but community support, weekly live sessions, uh, a lot of hours, multiple hours of evergreen content, meditations for you to do. And it'll be a really, really cool thing to be a part of. So obviously, everyone is welcome. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Yeah, I didn't even realize exactly like what might have been impacting some of my things. I've been having some experiences of anxiety the last several months where I felt like it had increased. And so I'm like, huh, maybe it's not just like me. Maybe there's something else that I need to flush out. um, yeah, well, thank you brought a tremendous amount of wisdom and mic drop moments. So I appreciate you and thank you for coming on and sharing your story, sharing the story of NABA and just co-creating with me and Boudreaux, who is
Yeah, I
now awake and
appreciate you
probably needs
too.
to go poop.
Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. Okay, bye.
All right. Bye, Boudreaux.